Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all here in Hong Kong, my first time in this city. And very nice to be here with you. I'm here having traveled quite long. It's been an 11-hour flight. And if you want to know where I came from, I arrived from Israel yesterday. I'm partly American, partly Israeli. And I travel around the world training professionals all over. And my business is human beings, and you know what? That transcends everything, because we're all human beings in the end. And we all have our abilities, our difficulties, our thinkings, our attitudes. I've done work for IFMA for years ago, and then I got reacquainted through Monica there, lovely lady, and we somehow got to this point. It's been a few months' journey, and I'm grateful to be here. This is going to be a bit out of the box of a session, because this is strategic thinking, authentic leadership, the key to change management. This is rather big titles, and we're dealing with human beings, and I'm very grateful to have attended Dr. Wong's session, because he really walked what I'm going to talk about, and he's done it. And I think if you looked at how he spoke and the disposition of his whole mannerism, this is a guy that smiles at people, and you can tell that when he runs a business, he runs a family. I had a little chat with him after the end there, and he says, it's really an art to run 10,000 people. And I said back to him, it's the way you run one person. Because when you deal with one person, that's how you deal with 10,000 people, because people are people. And that's been my theme over the last 20 years. I travel around the world and I meet various professionals all over, thousands by now. I do training for all thinking arts, really, which is where it begins in a way of originating idea, building it, originating an attitude, understanding it, understanding the big picture, getting to be creative, strategic, thinking out of the box, having a big picture, because all these things in the end really are the ones that, if you like, create the path where success can happen. So I'm going to talk to you today about various ideas. Understand that today is full of, if you like, seeds, which all need to be put into practice in order to get it to work. We all hear a lot of words in our life. The question is, what can we implement from what we hear? What can we actually change in the way we do business? And when I say business, I mean human business. From what I see and from what I experience, 90% of the skill today that is required is a human skill. 10% is technology. And it's a funny thing to say, because we live in an age of technology. But what people need more than anything today is the skill of dealing human to human. That is the best ROI out there. The best return of investment is investing in people. And I cannot say enough about that. And this is true to wherever I work in the world. Europe, the United States, Israel, it doesn't matter. It's a people's business. And we deal in an age of technology, but I would say to you, we actually deal in the age of human technology. Do we know actually how to deal with people? Do we know how to get the best of them? And Dr. Wong spoke exactly about that. What I think you've seen in the previous session just showed that that is the best ROI. This gentleman tripled his company's production in 6 years. And without humans being a family, he couldn't have done it. People have to pull in, to believe in what you say, to believe in what you speak, and to understand it totally, with their feelings, with their mind, with their emotions, in order to buy into something. And this is mainly what we're going to talk about today, because we live in a very hard age, and in a hard age you need soft skills, because you cannot go hard at a hard age. Let me see if I can handle this. We're in business. Is this number 2? Yes. I'm going to also ask at the end, there will be time for questions. And I'm not so rigid in the demonstration, so if you have something to say and you want to raise your hand, feel free, and if it's possible, I'll take that, okay? If it's live and it can happen and it provides something and it contributes, we'll do it, all right? Good. Now, what is strategic thinking? What is authentic leadership? And what is change management? There is so many misunderstandings about strategic thinking. I can tell you that when I conduct seminars about the subject is not understood. And I would put a few words, very important words to that now. It's how to think about the future. Strategic thinking is how to think about the future before it actually happens. In other words, to occupy the future before you're there physically. And you cannot do it 100%, but you can certainly do a 70% job on that, which puts you way ahead of the game. Authentic leadership is a very important subject today, because we live today, folks, in a time of, I would say, leadership crisis all over the world. There is a heavy disconnect between people and their leadership in all kinds of levels, companies, organizations, governments. And the leadership of the future, for it to succeed, has got to make the leap forward to understand, I think what Dr. Wang mentioned, that he's part of the company, he's part of the people, he's one of them. And not to use power over people mistakenly for leadership, because I think that's one of the big mistakes. These two terms have to be separated. A leader is not to have power over people. Leader is to work with people. It's a function rather than a hierarchy. So if you're a leader, you're a people's person today. And authentic leadership needs strategic thinking, especially where people are concerned. It needs to know how to think about people in the future. And why is it the key to change management? Because change can be working against you or for you. And leadership, authentic leadership, is one of the main engines in allowing change to happen in the best way possible. Because people take their cue from leadership. And if there is authentic leadership, the change will be much, much smoother than if it's a hard leadership that's disconnected from the people. So I would say this about the subject, just to give it some location so you understand why these words are put together. I'm trying to see how this works. I think I went backwards, didn't I? What did I do wrong here? I need the first. This is the first one? Okay. Now, isn't it nice that we do all have our follies, we don't know what we're doing in some things? And I'll tell you what, one of the things that I found in leadership, I'll just say that, it's okay to tell people you have weaknesses. It's really okay. A leader doesn't need to be the all-able person, because people just love to help. And when you give them the opportunity to do that, you win their hearts, if you talk about hearts, because they see you're a human being. So I have noticed over the years that when you are able to admit, when a leader is able to admit their follies, they actually score very well with people. It's a funny thing to say, and it's a small shift, but it does help a lot. Now, the future is unknown. We're all very good about what happened, and we can draw a lot from the past. But even where the past is concerned, do you know that as the past becomes further, we draw different lessons about the past? What we thought about an event a year later may change what we think about it 5 years later, or what it can affect us in our thinking. There are many, many examples to this, but I would just take the fact of the World Trade Center and what happened in 2001. The lessons drawn from that event change all the time. All the time. In the beginning, it caused an immediate panic. And in the States, I remember traveling to do training in Boston, and it was horrible within 1 month. After a year, we understood the bigger picture of what happened. 10 years later, we understand much more what led to what and what that caused. Because if you want to understand the past, you have to realize that there is what's called consequences of things. And consequences don't reveal themselves all in one time. It takes time for consequences to appear. And we think that something is bad or good. And sometimes if we wait a bit, we can see that in hindsight, it was the best thing that happened to us because we understood something that we couldn't understand unless that happened. And sometimes the price is smaller than what we would have paid otherwise. It often happens to a person, even in a small personal thing, if they just get hurt, they suddenly value what they don't have anymore. And they realize that they're actually lucky to have what they have. And that's a consequence of being hurt. Oftentimes when we lose the ability to walk for a while, or happened to me a few months ago, I was in Tel Aviv when there was a missile attack, and I had to run for cover and sprained my ankle quite badly and couldn't run for cover. And there for a moment there I felt completely vulnerable because the missile exploded not too far away. And I tell you, it's not a funny feeling. It's something strange when you're in that situation. It makes you realize that what you think is guaranteed, is not. It can change in a second. And I've learned a lot from that situation, although I've been in similar situation many, many years before that, but this really came to me and I said, right, I have everything I want in this life, and I'm going to value it just a little more as a result of this situation, because I was totally helpless, where I thought I was in total control, but I wasn't. And you know, you can talk about these things, but once you feel it, once you go through it, it changes your perspective. And you can take change like that and make it work for you, or become bitter. It's your decision. Or take a lesson like that and say, listen, I'm going to turn this into value. I'm going to turn this into an appreciation for what I do have. Or you can go the negative way and criticize the whole world. And I can tell you one thing, folks. Criticizing negatively is one of the sole things that makes people not think correct. I'll say that again. Negative thinking leads to incorrect decisions, because it's a thinking in protection rather than thinking forwardly. And we live today in a time where you do not know what's going to happen. So you cannot rely on what has happened and criticize everything that is new. That will not work for you. And I think it's very, very important that we understand this concept, because change is not going away. It's part of business today. And it's very important to understand it. I think I'm going to mess it up again. No. Great. Will you manage change, or will change manage you? When I say these words to you, will you manage change or will change manage you? What comes to mind as the difference to you right away? I'm looking for some participation, and we're going to, can we work it if somebody wants to raise their hand to get them the mic? Okay. Let's just have a little bit of input. You manage change or change manages you. What do you think is the difference? And by the way, don't worry about not saying the right thing, okay? Because if you want to, in a time of change, flow, you gotta be able to be willing to make mistakes. It's one of the most important things for change, the willingness to make mistakes and learn from them. And that's why I'm saying you cannot judge and criticize people, because the fear that everybody has to speak in front of other people because they're afraid to be judged or criticized can be stronger than the wish to have the next creative thought, would you believe? Can you see what I'm saying here? Say yes if you do. Thank you. So, what do you think is the difference between managing change and being managed by change? Go for it. Yes. Stephen.
It's about whether you're proactive or reactive, which is very relevant to facilities management, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Yes. What would you say is reactive? You weren't going to get away with it.
Oh, I can't get away with that? Okay, that's fine.
What would you say is reactive and what is proactive?
Well, obviously proactive is anticipating anticipating the requirements of, say, a client, I'm thinking on FM terms, as opposed to reactive, right, whereby you end up in the game of managing expectations.
Right, that's excellent, that's excellent. Any more? The difference between managing change and being managed by change. And we can take it on that line of reactivity versus proactivity, because usually when we are reactive, we fall back, don't we, on what we've done before. You know that saying, if you do what you've done, you'll get what you got? It's a very good one. It's actually very true. It guarantees a past performance repeating itself. So, what do you think is the difference between managing change and being managed by change? Because we all go through it all the time. And there's a central thing in here that needs to be understood. Go for it. Yes, this gentleman over there, right there. And then Jenny.
In one situation, you are in control. The other situation, you are being controlled.
Good. Excellent. And Jenny?
I think managing change is being part of the change process to drive the change instead of being affected by the change.
Okay. Let's look at some symptoms of managing change and being managed by change. What do you think are the symptoms of being managed by change? And when I say symptoms, I mean, how does it appear on the outside? How does it show? Stress, that's right. What else? There's one word, starts with a P. Huh? I hear something that sounds like the word I'm looking for. What was it? Panic? Yes. Panic is a form of exaggerated stress where the person cannot think. And it often happens when changes happen. That's why you need strategic thinking, because your mind can do the work before it happens and can actually cover most of the territory. When you manage change, you run much less emotional. You can think. You run, as they say in the States, cool. You know? Everybody in the States say, how are you doing? You go, cool. I take it to another level. You need to be cool in the thinking in order to manage change. Because when you're cool, you can see a lot more. When you can see a lot more, you can make informed decisions. And the way to do that is preparation. And remember my definition for strategic thinking? You gotta be prepared for the future. And to be prepared for the future, you gotta be able to think ahead. Thinking ahead is crucial. That's what can travel forward, folks, the mind. We cannot fly to the future. Our mind can. And part of the work I do with a lot of professionals is how to think forward about things and not be lazy in the mind. Because we have this incredible ability to use our mind in such a way that can pre-think situation. They might not happen, but because we've done that work, we are ready. Somehow it's like before you run a marathon and you get into shape, when the time comes, you can do the work. So although you may not be exact about what you think about the future, because you have done the work, you're ready. It's a very curious situation. There's much more to say about these things, by the way. I'm just touching points here and there, but there is a lot to say about change management and managing change. I've just done a session in Africa, 3 days on change management, and it was incredible, the process, not just in terms of knowledge, but what people came to understand about how they keep doing the same things all over again and expecting for help to come. You know that story? I'm going to tell a funny joke. I hope this is not to offend anyone, but I love to tell jokes. I'm sure you've heard this thing about this guy who's drowning in the Sea of Galilee, and this priest. And he says, okay, this is my test in Jesus. And he's drowning, and a helicopter comes by and tries to help him. He says, no, I'm waiting for Jesus to help me. And a boat comes by, and they're trying to rescue him, and he says, no, only Jesus will help me. And the boat comes again, and a professional diver comes, and he refuses, and then he submerges because he loses all his strength, and he drowns. And when he goes to heaven, he meets Jesus, and he says, listen, how come you didn't help me? I trusted you. He says, I know you did. I sent you a helicopter, I sent you a boat, I sent you a diver, and you didn't respond. He said, oh. Because oftentimes we expect things in the way we expect them in our head. We tell a story in our head of what we think should be the case, and we ignore what actually appears. We ignore the opportunities. This is what this joke is about. No offense to Jesus or anybody, okay? It's said with the best intention here. Now, at times of change, as Dr. Wang said, people are your greatest asset and the most affected. What do I mean by that? I mean that your stakeholders today are the people of your company, of your organization. And you know what? They may be sitting quietly and not saying anything, but change rattles them, folks. It rattles them. It scared the daylights out of people, change does. They're worried about their situation, they're worried about their family, they're worried about position, but they are trying to behave professional, which is the worst because it's all inside. They're quite inside, but you have no idea what's happening underneath. Just like the ocean, you see it all calm. There's a lot of life in the ocean underneath that we don't see. And we humans are like that. So at times of change, remember, look at people in the company and think they're being affected. They are my stakeholders, and I'm going to address their fears, their emotional needs, their worries, if you're a leader. And I'm going to address that even if they don't say anything, because it's there. Now, an authentic leader who has mastered strategic thinking would do that, even if nothing shows on the surface. They would do exactly that. They would understand that at a time of change, everything is rocking. Particularly, the emotional need is there. And I can tell you that when you address that, you will have taken care of a lot of the problem. Because, folks, people need more than anything. And I know that we talk about money as the leading incentive for success. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. Yes, everybody needs to put food on the table. But the leading incentive for success is what? Think about yourself, folks, before you answer it. This is not a question in the test. What is the leading reason that would keep a person stable in the organization? What do you think it is? Happiness. Keep going, it's getting a bit warmer. What? Respect. Comes under the title of what? Keep going, try.
Have a sense of taking control.
Taking control, what else? Self-satisfaction that comes from what? From what? What does the self-satisfaction come from? It's you, folks. Think about yourself. What do you need in order to feel settled in your company? Yes, the extra $500 or $1,000 would do well, wouldn't it? But what makes you feel really well? Achievement, but what about the achievement? Contributing to something larger. And then when you contributed, what then? Recognition, which is part of what? You want to feel belonging, don't you? The word is belonging. Humans have a huge need to belong and to feel recognized for their work. True or not? If you disagree, tell me. Huge need for recognition and belonging. Now, a strategic thinker would understand that in relation to people and would do everything in their power to cause regular periods of recognition to their workforce. That's the cheapest ROI out there, folks, and it's seldom done. Seldom done. For some reason, I do not know, I understand why, and I'm talking about 20,000 people later, I still don't understand why. Recognition, positive confirmation, or what I call positive vision, is very seldom done. And I do not understand why. Because it yields the best results when it's genuine. Not just nice words to pacify someone, when it's genuine. And this, folks, is one of the main stable anchors in change management. Because if people don't feel belonging, the rattling will throw them off. They need an inner stability. I'll talk about this as we go on in the lecture. Okay, so the question is, how to be ready for the future and how to use your mind in such a way that you are ready for the future. We could not have predicted, could we, 10 years ago, that 2.5 billion people would rely on social networks, could we? Do you know that 2.5 billion people today are part of Facebook and LinkedIn and all the rest of it? Why? Because they want to belong to something? Do you realize what a dramatic change that has been? And how much the human race is connected to each other via the brain. You can have one idea today and the whole world gets it within 10 seconds. Everybody is affected like this. It's like viruses. And in fact, I'm going to tell you a story from a book called Emotional Intelligence by Dr. Daniel Goleman, where he coined the term emotional viruses. Because I want you to understand how much things are conductive today and how they can affect people. And the importance of affecting people with what you want. This is what I want you to get from this story, okay? Now, this is a story about a bus driver in New York City who drives his bus down Fifth Avenue and goes up Madison Avenue. Why? Because Fifth Avenue is one way and Madison Avenue is the other way, okay? And this gentleman, Daniel Goleman, who is a top psychologist, gets on the bus and he gets greeted by this bus driver says, "Good morning, sir. Nice to meet you. I'm your driver, and I'm going to take you safely to your destination." Okay. The next person gets up there, and he says, "Hello, madam. I'm your driver. My name is Charlie," or whatever it was. "I'm going to make sure you arrive safely to your destination, that you're going to have a wonderful day. This bus ride is going to make it for you." And every person gets on the bus. And as the bus goes on, he goes, "Right, on the left, this is Central Park. They're going to have a dog show today here. And on the right, they're building a new building, and that's going to be, they're turning a landmark into," and he talks blah, blah, blah. And people in the bus who are totally like this, because Monday morning in New York City in August is a prescription for not being happy. True? It's hot, it's humid, and you're supposed to be on vacation. You're not supposed to be there. And so if you're there, you're like this. But it changed. And they were smiling and they were talking to each other. And this psychologist was going, "What am I seeing here?" Because in 10 minutes, the whole bus changed. And he got out of that bus and he said, "Right, this guy did in 10 minutes what I studied 10 years. He managed to be the captain of his ship. He managed to cause a positive emotional virus," that's the word he coined in that, virus, "in everybody else, and he affected everyone." And by the way, if you want to see how it works, watch all these little clips that they send in Facebook. What they do is they get someone in a train, and he starts laughing. He goes, "Hee hee hee." Okay? Everybody thinks he's nuts in the beginning. But you start to see the faces turning. They're starting to be infected. And within about 2 minutes, the whole train compartment is cracking with laughter. Nobody knows why they're laughing, but they're laughing because humans are contagious to each other. Now, you can be contagious in negative things, or you can be contagious in positive things. And strategic thinking says this is your decision and how you plan for it. So how does that relate to a manager or to a leader? They decide how they're going to be that day and why, and how they're going to show it to their people. So if their strategy is warmth, and they come to meet people, they don't just say, "Hello, good morning, nice to see you." But they say, "Hello, good morning, it's very nice to see you." And they put the kind of feeling in the words because they understand what they're doing. You know, I've just seen a movie in the plane. I think it's called Words and Pictures. And there was a war between two teachers about what is more important, words or art. And if you get, I think this movie is just out now. I forget the name of it, but there's a lovely idea about a teacher, two teachers. He's a words guy and she is an art girl. And they see how it affects both the students. And the truth is, because they're having a war between each other, who is going to win? But the truth is, both are needed exactly. So when you say good morning, you have the words. But if you don't put the picture of good morning and paint a beautiful picture in the way you say good morning, it's going to come as flat as a pancake. And we people, as part of our strategy as a professional, we need to understand that we affect other people in our communication and the way we speak and what we put in our words. Because our words are like pipes and we can fill it up with everything we like. Okay? And that's a strategy. I'll tell you another thing. Warmth can start as a strategy and it becomes a way of life. It's okay to manufacture warmth. It's okay. You'll then get affected by it and you don't want to do anything else. I'll tell you folks, from my training around the world, I've seen the profit margin grow by 40% when positive vision has been implemented. However, what I teach cannot be measured by machines. But if you ask yourself truly what can be measured by machines, is nothing humane. Because if I ask you, And I have done this. I work with a lot of scientists, and you know, scientists believe in what they see. And I asked them, do you only believe in what you see? And they said, yes. And I asked them, do you have children? And they say, yes. And they said, do you love them? And they say, yes. Show me the machine that measures it. Because when you come to true human values, you cannot measure it. You cannot measure the happiness in an organization, but what you can see a year later is that people are very willing to come to work, they're happy, that they're owning to responsibilities. The big buzzword in the States, do people take ownership? Well, do you let them take ownership? Have you created an environment where they will happily take ownership? Or do you micromanage them in a way that they're afraid to make mistakes and they will not take ownership? True or not? Because it comes to these kind of things. So, how you use your mind, and I'm just giving one example, is everything. And your mind, if it works right, if it has the right food, can create amazing results with other people. It depends if you're in control of your thoughts, or if you're learning to control your thoughts, or if you're a responsive person to what comes next and then you react from what you've already reacted before. That's called personal development. And it's a choice. And I'll tell you what, in this day and age, you can change easily if you want to. You have to have the discipline. You have to have the belief in yourself. And it's good to have other people who give you from time to time a tap on the shoulder. It's great to do that. People can change. And they can be affected in a very positive way very quickly, in the same way that they can be soured very quickly. It's very important that we understand that. We affect our environment in the same way that that bus driver affected the people. We just don't see it. Now, I don't know how many of you are in some function of leadership, but it doesn't matter, because your leadership is how you carry yourself around people in whatever it is you do, and with your family. I got to tell you a little story that happened to me in a seminar that I have done from the American government. This gentleman was sitting there, and it was strategic thinking. Sounds like a very dry subject, right? Who wants to hear about strategic thinking? And he was sitting there and he was examining me. We did a 2-day training. He was examining me like this. And we talked about pre-thinking things and learning to read the runes and learning to read what's happening and to think according to facts rather than to think according to predisposed ideas or opinions from the past. And anyway, we come the next morning. I usually work 2 or 3 day training sessions, 7 hours a day, and then we go home and we come back. And he comes to me first thing in the morning. He says, I don't know what happened to me yesterday, but last night was the first time that me and my 15-year-old son have spoken after 2 years. And I thank you for it. Now, I didn't come to do that. I didn't come to fix his relationship with his son. But there was something in the fact of strategic thinking for him that did just that, because he realized they had a responsibility. Now, I love stories like this, because that really tells the story. And by the way, I want to say something. There are people here from HR. Is there any HR people here? Is there any people connected to HR who know somebody in HR? Thank you. Okay. One of the strategic changes that I institute in companies in HR, and this is really simple. I have a person where I specialize a lot in HR training. And human resources for me, I've redefined the whole subject. I take it to another level. But part of my human resources demands of people that I work with is to create a position or to have someone in a certain position who is responsible to call people at their homes to ask if everything is okay, if any help can be gotten. That's it. Amazing what that does. It is amazing what that phone call does to people. They feel somebody cares for them. They feel they belong. They want to contribute. They will never leave the company. By the way, you heard about Southwest Airlines in the States? Yes? Yes? No? If you did, great. If not, this is a company that people hardly ever leave. Why? Because they have such HR practices. It is not enough to say we are family. It is very wise to think, how does a family operate together and then translate it to organization? Because most of the time you spend more time with people in your organization than you spend with your family. And you know them intimately. And that's very important investment. So the mind, yes. How are we doing with time? I don't have any gauge with time, and I can... What time is it? Half past 11. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. So, what is thinking out of the box? Everybody talks about thinking out of the box. Do you know what the box is made of? Do you know that elusive box? What is it made of? Hello? Because the term out of the box has become a boxy term, no? Everybody uses it. I'm not sure we know what we're talking about. In a way, boxes are made of constraints, of fears, of what not to do, and suspicions, and all the stuff that prevents thinking. That's what boxes are. And basically, it says, it charts a way that you're supposed to think about things, and everybody thinks according to that. And I think what Dr. Wang said is, the way he's thinking out of the box is, hey, why not? It's not enough to say that's how we've always been doing business. Because I tell you what, companies that do that find themselves out of business very quickly these days. Do you know that you cannot plan ahead more than 3 months these days? You can, but if you don't adjust, you'll find yourself way out of touch. There is no planning ahead for 5 years anymore. Part of what I do, I'm a futurist. How to look at the future. And I can tell you, you cannot plan ahead more than a few months. And it's getting narrower at that time. You gotta be with your finger on the pulse all the time these days. You gotta read what's happening. You gotta be totally out there with people, completely. Otherwise you lose it. And the decision making that is based on the box of how things were done increases the margin of error by hundreds of percent. Because it's a different story out there. I mean, we live in an age where by the time you buy a computer and you take it to the car, 4 new ones have been invented. That's how quickly. And do you know that there is a whole population in the world today that is absolutely scared of this? There are people who are totally scared of these changes. And they're good people. They can contribute a lot to organizations. They don't know what to deal with the technical age, but they're excellent people. And then you've got the young generation who thinks totally different to most of us in this room. They've grown in a different environment. They need to be dealt with in a totally different way. You know, they're very techno inclined. I have a son, he's like that. But you know what they need the most? They need guidance and warmth and direction, and dare I say, I'm going to say the L word in a business context, love. They need to be loved. because they have totally different talents, but they are totally going all over the place. And they need to have a direction. So there is a function for everyone. So if you have a company of older and younger people, it can work a treat. I work a lot in companies in how to narrow the generation gap and to find a cohesion and a purpose for everybody to agree to. And it doesn't have to be the same. The purpose is the same, but the expression is different. Are you with me on that? Yes, no? Okay. The ability to think different and have the right instinct forward. Let me say something to you about instinct. The function of instinct is to protect us, to guide us. And it's a very fast thing that happens without thinking. It happened to me a couple of years ago. I drove a car and I didn't realize the road was slippery. I just got the car out of the showroom. I was driving it, and boom, it revered out of control. Now, I don't know what I did, but I did everything perfect. I couldn't have thought about it, where I ended up 180 degrees the other direction, next to a curb, and I'm looking, how did that happen when there are all these cars coming towards me? Nothing happened. I thought, wow, that's an instinct. And you know what? I've seen how that instinct works when you give your mind the right kind of food to work with. You develop an instinct for the future. You develop an instinct for people. You develop an instinct of what's the right thing to do without ever anybody learning it, teaching it to you in an academic way. Somehow we think falsely that learning is academia. To some degree, there is a truth to it. But you can learn so many things that are not academic, because we humans work so much more sophisticated than we give ourselves credit to. And we miss a lot of the picture. Now, when I train people, when I train professionals, I train them to think about situations correctly, to think out of the box, to be creative, to be strategic. Then they start to develop an instinct when they do that enough. They start to get, as we say in English, that they say in England, they say, you get the knack of it. And you can't quite explain how that happens, but you somehow know what to do. And if somebody asked you, how do I know this? How do you know this? You wouldn't be able to tell them. You just know. Anybody ever experienced these kind of things that I'm talking about? I'm hearing, yes. You can admit to it in public. I know. It's a yes, yes. We can do this. And it's okay to be able to engage your instinct at the work level. And I'll tell you what's another thing okay. It's okay to feel for people. Because decision-making are mostly made today by emotions, folks. People say they make decisions based on mental thing. No, they don't. So if you do make decisions by emotions, make sure they're the right emotions, because you can have positive emotions or you can have negative emotions. They'll lead to a different kind of decision-making. Listen, people go to a store a lot of times and they buy from a salesman that makes them feel good about themselves. True or not? And they rather pay a few more dollars. True or not? I do. Don't you? You go to a place, and if they treat you right and they make you feel emotionally well about yourself, you'll buy. You'll pay the 10% extra, but you'll buy. That's a decision-making based on emotions. And you know what? It's made in the high corporate level, and it's made in the high government level, emotions. And we better get the right ones. And those lead to instincts. Okay, authentic leadership. Now, this is a key today. As I said earlier, we are in a time of leadership crisis. Authenticity expresses itself in many different ways. One of the main things is transparency. The ability to not hide as a leader, to be informative, and to be a people-friendly person. Because authenticity, you can make mistakes. if you're a person that doesn't tolerate other people's mistakes, I've just been told that I have 5 minutes, so I better, and I paused for a second. That was a change management for me to see that 5-minute thing. They need to see that you're trustworthy. All the things that we would expect from ourselves is what leadership needs. It's not such a big mystery. And I tell you that, folks. All this stuff of how to get to the big picture, those are things that we can all do. I mean, you travel in a plane and you suddenly see what you thought was the whole world as a little point, and you see the big picture and you say, hey, it's part of a much bigger view. And we can do that with our mind. We can take distance from things and we can elevate. And that's how we see the big picture. When you're not so personally involved with things, you see the big picture. You remove yourself a bit. Now, this is, believe it or not, part of strategic thinking. This is how to carry on. And at the time of change, a stable workforce is essential at times of change. Yes, we've spoken about this because they are your main stakeholders. What causes stability in people? In few words, is that they need to know where they are with you. They need to know that they're being thought about and cared for. And all those things, folks, at times of change, lead to productivity, what I'm talking about. Especially if you take into account the fact that change is constant. It's not going away. What you can do is stabilize yourself and your company to deal with questions that will arise for sure at times of change. Now, there's a lot I can say about all this. I'll take a few questions because we have a lot of work and, that we've done, and it's not complete by no means. This today was meant to be just some seeds. This is a 2-3 day training that I do, okay? And I hope you've got something out of it. So let's have a couple of questions, and I'll address those.